Hi, my name is Robert. Please read the comments in the About section of this video. It has valuable information and updates. My YouTube channel has a disclaimer video that I encourage you to watch. And please like, share, and subscribe. I hope you found what you're looking for. Thank you very much for watching. Went out to the junkyard today to pull a knuckle assembly and a couple other things. Didn't quite work out the way I planned, but I did get a few ignition coils for a XC90. So right now I'm going to back this car up into the shade and replace the sway bar end links. They're in need of replacement. So let me go ahead and back it up and get those wheels off so I can replace those end links. Got the wheels supported and jacked up a little bit so that the sway bar end link bolt comes out easier, as you can see. So let me take the lower bolt out, and you see the boots torn on it. So those things get noisy when they get worn out. For some reason this bottom side got really worn out, and the top seems pretty good still. You can't even wiggle it in there. And that side is loose and noisy and rattling around, spinning around and everything. Well, here's the heavy duty replacements. They're Mally. So let me go ahead and put those in, get this over with. Installed and tightened down real good. So I'm going to lower this jack here, put the wheel on, jack the car back up, get that jack stand out, remove the scissor jack. Yeah, I noticed this mud flap was missing a few of the rivets, so I had a couple, so I went on ahead and popped those in there so we don't lose a mud flap. Starting out today driving a Raspberry car. Have about 14 miles on it. I need to put 300 on it to see if it's consuming oil since I replaced the turbo. So I'm going to start it up, drive it a little bit, see if I hear that turbo whine that I was hearing before. I think it was a turbo whine. And going to go and take a look at a wagon that somebody has for sale on Craigslist for $500. See if that may be something I may purchase and rebuild. Claims it only has a bad turbo and needs a battery. I have a battery, so I may have a turbo as well. If this one doesn't fix this oil consumption, I'll swap the other one back in this one, even though it's a little noisy, and go from there. Okay, I'm driving the car, and I hear a little bit of the whine, and it seems like drivetrain noise. But I don't quite hear the howl that I was hearing before since I replaced the turbo. So let's see if I hear the whistle once I come to a stop. I'm on like a main road, so I'm not going to hear the whistle. So I'm just going to shut it down and take a look at this vehicle. Well, it looks like I'm about to buy a car. I checked this vehicle out, and it needs an intercooler. So the intercooler is hanging down about 6 inches, and somebody knocked it off on one of these parking curbs or something. Then of course it needs a regular service maintenance, so looks like I'm in good shape, and the guy agreed to sell it to me for about $300. So car looks awesome, only has like 112,000 miles on it or something. So let me get this car and get it out of his way. Quick check to see if this Raspberry car is still smoking bad. I parked it for a few minutes here. It's been running. I'm going to tap the gas, see if I get a big puff of smoke. I don't see any smoke, so maybe the turbo helped it. I didn't see a big puff of smoke out of it, but my neighbor said that she did, so I'll check it again here in a little bit. The big thing is if it's consuming oil, I'll probably put 100 miles on it today. Going out here in the country to look at I think it's a 2005 XC90. A guy bought it. He resells vehicles, kind of like a used car dealer. One of my viewers asked me to come up here and help him troubleshoot a misfire and possibly see what else may be wrong with it so he can sell it. Way out here at 5,800 feet. Man, this guy just about lives on top of the world out here. I think we're almost 6,000 feet now. Car still smells oily bad. I don't see any. There we go. We got a good puff of smoke out of the exhaust that time. But I don't hear that whistling noise anymore at the end of the rev. I was hearing a whistling noise. There's that XC90. Let's see what's going on with it. Guy's got dogs, so I'd like for him to come up here and meet me before going down there. Okay, driving this XC90 05 model. It seems like the car has a pretty bad miss. He said it was a 301 code, so number 1 misfire. Had no guts going up the hill. Let me see if it's smoking or not. It's not smoking, but you can hear it panting. So I'm going to put the code reader on there and see what it's doing as far as codes. It may have vacuum leaks as well. Pretty sure this is the i5 turbo. I don't see check engine light lit in the dash, but let me scan it for codes anyway. He's got a nice XC all-wheel drive he's driving there. Looks nice anyway. I don't know what the heck that is sticking out the hood. And anyway, no codes found. One pending code, a 303. So he said it was a 301, it's got a 303 here. So let's pull these plugs, check the gap, maybe install a couple coils and see if that helps. Get this cover off. You really got to lift this intake tube out a little bit. So I took that loose, removed this screw here, removed this screw here. I should be able to lift this tubing up enough to get that cover out now, as long as I don't have another thing over there. So let me pull that up so I can get this cover up. All right, I got this tube lifted up and out, the intercooler tube. Got these screws out of this cover. I'm gonna pop the latches on the side of this cover, lift it off, then I'll have access to my plugs and coils. Now to unplug these coils, these things are a little strange. It's easier to lift up on the side of them, of the coil, and then wiggle the plug out. So I'm going to remove 1 and 3, since those are the codes we're getting. I'm going to go ahead and pull those coil packs with one bolt and pull the plugs, check the gap on the plugs, check to see what the condition are, because the plugs that we got are actually pretty good. They don't look like they were old at all. They have no discoloring on the ceramic part of them. So, and I believe all of these are the same. These R6 plugs on these turbos. So, look like I dropped that one and knocked the gap off, but I'll fix that and put these two in those spots with these 2 coil packs. These coil packs actually look new, brand new off of that vehicle. Yeah, these coils are the same, 307, 13, 416, same number as there, except for the ones on the right there, the ones I pulled out of the salvage yard, 12 bucks a piece, look brand new. So let me go ahead and pull the plug, see what they look like. The plug that was in there, as you can see, the tip of it's pretty much gone, and it's got a huge gap, and that's the one I pulled out of the car in the salvage yard. Yeah, this gap on this plug is like
gone.
0.58, way bigger than it needs to be. So I'm gonna drop those 2 new plugs in there, gap the rest of these plugs, and see if it runs much better, which I'm sure it will. Take a look at this plug that was in number 3. I mean, really, there's like absolutely nothing left in that gap. It's crazy. These things have probably never been pulled out of this car. I pulled the coil pack out of number 2. The coil pack came out of the rubber boot and got stuck down in the cylinder. I had to work it out with 2 hands. And as you can see down in the coil pack, if this thing focuses, there's a spring down in there. So the spring and everything was out and exposed. And you could use them like that, but you want to make sure you get that boot back on the coil pack as best you can, because it's an insulator and it keeps oil out of the cylinder down there. Looking around, unfortunately, this timing belt's got a lot of cracks in it. It's probably never been replaced. So we're going to button this up, put the turbo tube back in, take it for a test drive. It's about to put the cover back on, and I noticed this engine didn't have as much oil on them as I'm used to. So I looked and seen a little crack in the upper PCV hose, and the whole dang thing came apart. So that needs to be fixed soon. When you hook that intake tube up, put that screw in first. Don't snug it down. Put the one in over there, and then of course that's in, but then you tighten the one in up here and you'll be good to go. Snug those down, they don't need to be tight. Snug down the cover screws. I even put NICs on them, they don't need to be tight. So we're ready to fire this thing up, take it for a ride, and see how smooth it runs now that it's at least gapped. Got to have a couple of newer plugs in it. Man, this truck feels like a new vehicle. It's accelerating nice and smooth and strong. It's not vibrating or shaking or anything. So I don't even feel bad about getting out there with a car coming. That's with 3 worn out plugs. Nice and smooth. Bad plugs. Okay, this little trip we took, the vehicle says 13.7 and the scan gauge says 13.6. So it's pretty close, right on. Now the vehicle says 13.6. So that's a very accurate toll. I'm out at this 05 XC90, and the guy that I was with this morning said he'd like to have this steering wheel. So I pulled the 3 bolts out of the lower collar, took it off, opened up the upper collar, unsnapped it from the boot. I slid the turn signal stalk out, came over here, slid the wiper stalk out. They just kind of unplugged. And now I'm going to try to figure out what size bolts are in the back of the steering wheel so I can get the airbag off and then take the steering wheel off. So maybe 30 millimeters, let me see. Okay, to get the steering wheel loose, it's kind of weird. You put a flat tip screwdriver in the back side of it, and then you run it down until it stops, and you catch that metal bar and you pry that bar toward the inside of the steering wheel, toward the center, and it pops loose from the grip that it has right here. So you do that on both sides, your airbag comes out. Then you unplug these connections from the airbag, squeeze those tabs in and pull them off. Next, you take this screw loose here in the middle, and I guess I need to unplug this green plug as well. Squeeze the tab on that, pull that loose. Well, I got that steering wheel out of the junkyard. Somebody had an 18 I could borrow. Pulled that bolt out of the middle of it. It came right off. Get me something to drink out of my cooler here. Keep a cooler with yourself in the summertime. And got to run a couple errands and try to pick up the car I purchased this morning. I've driven about 105 miles with this vehicle, and I'm going to check the oil because it still smells like it's burning oil pretty bad. In the back of this car is actually wet with oil. When I went to close the trunk, it was wet with oil, so I believe this exhaust is spraying oil back on the back of the vehicle. Smokes almost every time I stop at a traffic light, so Even though that turbo was making a little noise, I don't think it's the source of this oil leak. So when it settles down here in a few minutes, I'm going to check the oil on it. And then I'm going to pack up my black car and try to go get the car I purchased today. Well, this engine consumption thing has gotten worse. Unless I have a line loose going to the turbo, this thing has burned 1.5 quarts in 100 miles. So I'm going to have to take a look at this turbo, see if I hooked everything up right, check the drain, make sure it's not leaking. And if all that stuff is dry, I have a serious issue here. This engine has a serious issue here blowing oil out the tailpipe. Well, looks like I got a ton of oil down here. So maybe I didn't get my oil drain seated right. So I'll put it up on ramps in the morning, get that seated right, and start over with this oil check, because it looked like I was blowing oil under the car, because like I said, the back of the vehicle is covered with oil. So maybe I didn't get something tightened down right, and I'll try again with this oil consumption check. Kicked off this morning, replaced the other 3 spark plugs on this XC90, running nice and smooth. Now we're going to change the fuel door hinge on it and get this thing to where the fuel door closes properly. Basically what happens to these fuel doors is the hinge cast breaks off on them after a while. Plastic gets brittle. Then the hinge spring just flops around there. Now the doors are not closing and staying closed. So you unhook that, you push the 4 pins through, you pull the door off, pop the hinge off the door, and put the new one in place. Okay, these pins stick out of this little hinge. You break those off, you flip them around, you press the hinge in place, and then you push the pins in. After you flip them around, you push them into the hole so that they're flush with the hinge. And then you take that metal spring and you clip it in there. Let me show you. I have the pins pushed in. I got the spring clipped into the plastic. Then when you push the door closed, it pops closed and holds closed. Going to the machine shop to check or pick up the head for the donor car and get some progress going on that. Maybe get it done in the next couple of days. And look at here, folks. We have a head back from the head shop for the donor car. Let's get that thing cleaned up, rebuilt, and installed.